Thank you for joining us for the ICA Boston's Artist Voice program. My name is Ruth Erickson, and I'm the Mannion Family Curator at the ICA and the coordinating curator of Virgil Abloh's traveling survey, Figures of Speech, which was organized by the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago and opens at the ICA in Boston on July 3rd, 2021. I am pleased to introduce the conversants for our program, Virgil Abloh and Josh Johnson. Virgil Abloh is an artist, architect, engineer, creative director, artistic director, industrial designer, fashion designer, musician, DJ, and philanthropist. Born in Chicago to Ghanaian immigrant parents, Abloh studied civil engineering and then completed a master's degree in architecture at the Illinois Institute of Technology. A tireless collaborator and innovator, Abloh is a genre-bending artist and an eminent figure in the world of fashion. In 2013, he founded the globally celebrated Off-White, and in 2018 became the first Black artistic director of Louis Vuitton's menswear. His museum survey, Figures of Speech, traces 20 years of his work across all media. Josh Johnson is a performer, dancer, and choreographer. He joined Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater in 2009 and worked with the Forsyth Company from 2011 to 15. He has performed and collaborated with numerous artists, including Anne Imhoff, Candace Williams, Wu Sang, and Boychild. Johnson is part of the loosely affiliated band of interdisciplinary artists, Moved by the Motion, that creates live performance and film since 2013. For this program, I will be speaking with Virgil and Josh on their recent collaboration, the film and moving image fashion show, Peculiar Contrast, Perfect Light, that premiered in January 2021. Well, first, I just want to thank you and Virgil, Josh, for being with us and talking about this incredible film that you all made, Peculiar Contrast and Perfect Light, which premiered in January 2021 to show the men's fall and winter 21 men's line from Louis Vuitton. And I know when I first saw this, I was just so floored. And, you know, so many other people were critics and artists, and I was getting the link sent to me by, I feel like, everybody I know. And Virgil, when you first posted the link on Instagram, you had this really heartfelt post, which I jotted down here. You said, "My whole being has been poured out into this film here. The only thing important to me right now is that the names in the credits and every member of my Louis Vuitton team feels their genius. It is not just fashion or films we make. It's space for new stories and artworks to be placed." And I was really taken with that. And I'm hoping what we can do today is just sort of lean into that space that you all made and really talk about this work that you made with a lot of other collaborators. And I know you also worked with Moved by the Motion, a collective of artists that includes the visual artist Wu Sang and others. And so I just wanted to begin maybe by asking, like, what led you to each other and what led to this collaboration? I know you have the Chicago connection.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually just tribes. You know, like if you peel away like the modern construct of the world, like there's just tribes roaming around the earth, and some connect, some have things in common. So Josh and I, like, it has to be like this has to be like a 3-year initial idea, very slow paced, like engagement around what to do, you know, like, wouldn't you say? Like, we linked up well before.
He's just like, we probably met like a couple times before that.
Yeah.
No, it kind of like slowly built into like figuring out what we should do, you know. And this was like, he like hit me up, was like, "This is it." Like,
yeah, no, like I responded to just the facts of it. Like, there might have been an unresponded text for like 6 months, you know, that I responded to, and I was like, "Hey, I got it finally." Because I think, you know, when you, in hindsight, everything is 2020. It was sort of like us as individuals, we're our different tribes, right? Speaking, like trying to battle the same exact things, but we come from a different place. And it's like, it's fitting that we're having this conversation in the context of art, because in the context of pop culture, like two Black guys it can be just known. Like I can be known as a fashion designer, it could be a DJ or rapper, whatever. Like those contexts are sort of like assumed, by popular figures in our stature and in our skin tone. But when it comes to, I think subconsciously for both of us, it was like, let's do something that has a weight to it, not just do something that happens like in a space, in a nightclub, in a, for friends, we have communities that support us. So it could just be some community thing that never would have reverberated out. And that's probably why we thumbs up and we're like, all right, this is the one.
Yeah. I mean, that echo of like transcending everything around our community is like somehow links people together too. It's kind of crazy.
One of the springboards for this project was this amazing 1953 essay by James Baldwin titled Stranger in the Village. And this recounts the experiences staying in a Swiss village where he retreated to in order to write. And he starts the essay with this great line. He says, "From all available evidence, no Black man had ever set foot in this tiny Swiss village before I came." And I was introduced to the essay and sort of through your project, and I read it, and I was so struck by how your film begins with this black hat of the singer and poet and performer Saul Williams kind of peeking up over this totally white, snow-covered mountainous landscape. And there was this kind of beautiful mirroring that you achieved between essay and film. And I wanted to hear the story of, how you came across this essay, what really struck you about it, and like, how did you take inspiration from it and bring it into the film?
It's worthy to timestamp this conversation and the impetus of making that film. It was like 2020, at the end of it. So the end of such a tumultuous year, another civil rights like uprising regarding like the representation of Black people, like that was seeping into like every crevice of me and everyone that I work with. So Mahfouz, Sultan, and Chloe, they're a duo that is closely linked to my studio, and we're always researching. Like I think when you find that kids like us, we have a plethora of reference points that sort of we recall on for a given time. And the James Baldwin essay was so poetic, when we were sort of like looking at it with 2020 eyes, was like, hey, I have this position at Louis Vuitton. I have this sort of dual life of, existing in Europe in the lead design space at a fashion house, which is predominantly not diverse. And a lot of that sentiment about like a double consciousness rings true. And then when I called Josh, I didn't even know where Josh was, like I think I knew that he was in Europe, but like, and I hit him up. He's like, I'm in Zurich right now. Like, full crew and the whole crew is there. I was like, here, look at this. Cause it kind of, you can relate. And so Josh, when we came with that, did anything spark?
Yeah, like coincidentally, I was like reading the essay at the same time, or like just before that, like also relating that to like how you're explaining like the space you're in within the larger space that you're in a European situation, like everything kind of crossed paths in this weird way. And my position being here in a place like obviously not made for like this. So it's like, and then also maybe we were planning a trip to the actual village or something like that. I mean, like, yeah, everything crossed ways with the essay to kind of reflect exactly what was going on, feel what's going on there, and like being mad that I'm not there to like experience it or like do what I can to like help the situation. I don't know, but need to talk about it in some way, So that's like.
Yeah, and Ruth, I think what makes it not valid, but what makes it poignant is that in order to talk about race, right? In my mind, the world's doors open and close. They're the most open in the moments of uprising, because that's when it's at the top of everyone's news cycle, emotional cycle. And so what you're seeing is like with those doors open, the sort of maximum amount of understanding and acceptance of expression. That's what this film sort of came through. And it's like, you can imagine if you had this film or this documentation or these words coming in 2018, 2017, you know, you have a completely different understanding of what Black artists as a whole like are voicing. You know, it's the same thing at all times, but it sort of gets crystallized in different contexts when obviously the year was what it was.
And there's really so many striking aspects of this film, but I feel like language is one of the sort of most immediate that I was really struck by. And it's interesting to hear about sort of the way that that language and essay and text was a sort of inspiration point to you. And there are really like so many countlessly beautifully written and spoken lines throughout this piece. I just like jotted down a few to sort of give a sense. You know, near the beginning, Saul Williams again says, "My blackest self, whose whitest death is luxury. I am no stranger anymore. The world is love to me." And others that I copy down in my journal are deconstruct the narratives, make spaces, take down the walls, unravel the mysteries, make it up to me. And as Black people, as trans people, as marginalized people, the world is here for our taking, for it takes so much from us. I mean, it's like so incredible. It brings tears to my eyes. I just wonder how you could talk about like language in this project and in this film and how some of these texts were written and were conceived.
It's very much like when you study jazz or the idea of jazz as like a Black art expression. It's just like musicians come and it's like free, it's all improv in a way. And that's the magic thing that most people wouldn't have known with this film. It's like, it was like, it's completely improvisation in a way. Yeah. You know, like it's very scary. Like making a film that is improv, you know, like the clothes don't come until 3 days before. Saul Williams doesn't get to really be in the same room and engage, but it's like, we all felt this sort of like freedom in the expression, you know, like there was like, I try to make a space that's so neutral and it's like everyone express the ideas so all the trains can run on time. But like he's saying, like Kai, Saul Williams 10 years ago or today, so like every contributor sort of getting to do like this therapy session about their experience, you know, and to me, it's important to note the megaphone at which we're speaking on. Like, this isn't like a little thing happening in the Lower East Side or whatever, you know. That's why I'm grateful for you to sort of, you know, you saw this piece and we're like, it has to be in the show, you know, like we're just creating it because it needs to be created, but the context is fully fulfilled to be able to contextualize it and rationalize it. You know, Saul Williams, you know, he's like a living, walking, breathing legend. You know, his work sort of formed my brain about what work could be. And then it's like, we have this Rolodex to people thankfully to call, and they pick up the phone and they're sort of like, hey, I like what you guys are doing. But yeah, Josh and I are the same. It's like that, casting him in that role is not just casting the body and the skin and the words. It's like we're recalling his whole canon and saying like, this is a space. And like, you know, it's like, it's perfect. It worked out perfect.
Yeah, the space is also like, I mean, that's why the name makes so much sense. It's like this space that creates this peculiar contrast between like the space that it should exist in and the space that it's existing in, and the like, the power that it has is not made for the thing that's happening. You know, like it's not made for that. Under this perfect light, you know, like that's what's really crazy. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's fascinating. It's so fascinating to hear about all this improv, because I feel like the films that I've been privy to or part of, you know, it's like a really clear storyboard and every, you know, next step and shot is kind of mapped out. And one of the other things I found really striking was all of the forms of movement in this film.
Yeah.
Like there's ice skating, there's falling, there's walking, like there's just every countless way that a body moves through space. And then there's also these moments of like intense stasis. like when that one figure is sort of like splayed out and sort of frozen against the wall. So I wondered, I was thinking about compared to a conventional fashion runway show, which sort of has a certain pace to it. And this movie, this film really like has so many different kinds of movement and paces. So I just wanted to like hear a little bit about that sense of motion you were going for. Like, again, maybe it was all improv.
There's like a couple levels of composition going on. I guess it's like the stranger itself, the composition and trajectory of the stranger moves through like 3 different characters. But initially overall to say that the stranger potentially is all and every one of us or something like this in that situation. But the figure that's laying, yeah, like it was kind of like the deconstruction of the stranger, and like the one performing like the mind and the journey, one performing the body, and the other one performing the voice of the stranger. But the body is like broken up and kind of deconstructed, like how do you say it? Like moving through filters of their echoed oppression or something, like, I don't know, like pressure on the body to show or replicate some kind of like trauma to it. And like that is moved through the other dancers in the same way. It's like mimicking the wall being deconstructed in some way, like fitting itself into the architecture as like a gesture towards the deconstruction of the narrative, So that's movement.
Yeah, and that's where the real, like the epicenter of the collaboration was me telling my story through fashion, right? Like the bigger narrative within my own body of work, which through diving through the show, is like the canons, right? Like there is the canon of art, which is what is assumed to be in museums and galleries, and then there's like for lack of a better term, is a black canon, a whole, just as everything else is marginalized. Imagine the nuance and the history and the details that we as Black artists ultimately feel like are misunderstood. That's why they're cast off. So if you take my trajectory in fashion, like I hit a limit before this show, which was like, okay, if you understand fashion, it's supposed to be like a model, like walking like a statue down a runway with people on either side, like with their hand on their chin. I always say, like, judging. It's like something weird, right? It's a weird tradition that came nowhere from where I'm from, right? But it is I can acknowledge it as like it'd be like a white cube, like some point someone said like, hey, all the walls have to be white, the light has to be even. Fashion the same. But in 2020, obviously I'd already been at a sort of frustration point with the show. That's what led me to call Josh. Like if you see, everyone who's watching this should have seen, the prerequisite is to watch Josh's work, and it's like transcendent, it's otherworldly, and this is not, I've seen shows that are very much like other forms of dance or other, and like quite obviously when you watch this is not just like movement to move, this is not like a copy and paste on something. Each character that Josh casted played a role, groups of characters played a role. Like you have like the surveillance, which is one of my favorite moments, because just in movement, it describes what it feels like to exist. Like when I go to a luxury fashion store, when I go down the street driving my car, I'm surveilled. Like, how do you, like, it doesn't matter what I do, what my title is, what my name, it's like, and so without getting on a soapbox and saying like, hey, this is the experience, like one movement that he choreographed, 10 seconds of a film on fashion can deliver a message and a feeling of having people look over their shoulder just by you existing.
Yeah, the surveillance, I forget about this. I always forget about the surveillance.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's like, that's what it feels like. That's like exactly what it
Yeah, to wake up every day. But it's like, what I love is like, obviously it's like the sentiments have existed since Baldwin and beyond, but this was the most viewed fashion show of all time, but for us, it wasn't a fashion show. So for us to deliver this message, very high, potent, very like on the surface and deep sentiment within pop culture, you know, so that it doesn't, your eyes don't glaze over. Because if I start yelling and saying, yo, you know, racism is this, I feel this way, people's ears, it's how humans are tuned, you know. So like if someone starts expressing a sentiment that you don't agree with, like the shutters close until you can get away, and then you know, go to a next situation. But the sort of thumbprint of my existence, my art contribution, is figuring out a way to have high sentiment operate at pop culture level, you know. That's how I sort of make sense of it all.
Yeah, that's real.
I think what you're describing is exactly how I felt it. Like it was this intensely real. It was about like wonder and pain and need and, you know, friendship. But it was like achieved through this sort of like otherworldly, dreamlike state, you know? So it was like these colliding aspects of the most intensely real and felt with something that was like, where is this place? This place keeps changing. Like every, you know, like it was sort of like this instability, and it's just incredible. Virgil, I do want to ask you a little bit about the collection. It's called Ebonics, and you know, it's been described and talked about as sort of investigating these dress codes of certain archetypes. And then you also see the sort of introduction of tourist and purist, which is something that you also have in the exhibition, of this sort of dyad of ways of moving throughout the world. But I wonder if you could just sort of share a little bit more about some of your thinking about the collection as you were talking about.
Yeah, no, and it dovetails after just like the other side of my brain of like the canon of shows. It's like the canon of clothes too, right? There's a formality of creating collections at the space that I exist in Paris, for example. And the clothes were a departure too, like a frustration with the sort of format of uniformity or linearness. Like, you know, diversity was the biggest topic of the year. And I read that as why we want diversity isn't just for like numbers, statistics. It's I want to see a different output. You know, I want to see non-linearness. Like usually this is like fashion in layman's term, but usually when you see a runway show progress, it's like one look gives a signifier to the next. So it's all very linear, like borderline strict, boring, static, you know, like that describes traditional contemporary fashion. For me, when you go into the black canon, I had this sort of like joke with my friends. It's like, you know, like as a culture, you don't dress boring. You know, like boring isn't like there's no, and describe it in whatever words. It's like that monotony or that sort of like restriction or demure is like a trait that just naturally, you know, I'm from Ghana in West Africa. Like that's where my parents are from. That's where, you know, my heritage was dropped on the earth. And when it comes out and then lives in America and travels to Europe, I'm starting to compare and contrast. Do you like assimilate into a space, or do you start to sort of reverberate exactly where you're from? So that's why the clothes took on this sort of abstraction. And Ib Kamara for me is like the, you know, he's super important contemporary voice in fashion. That's like, you know, should have his name in a gold plaque somewhere. Is like, you know, we aligned on that, and he works across Off-White and Louis Vuitton. But like the culture thing was a big deal for me. Like if we want to see diversity, it's like, let me show you what kente cloth from Ghana looks like. It's like, this is what my dad would wear to formal events, and my friends in America would be like, yo, your dad's got a sheet on him and my dad's wearing a suit, you know, like what's up with that? And that sort of cultural delay is due to that it's not accepted, you know, as much as we want. So for me, it was like that collection is like free. You can sort of see it in the clothes. It's like unrestricted from the formula of how to present high level ideas, and it doesn't attempt to sort of edit. I think this whole construct of editing, that's a big deal, you know, to exist in a space. You can say that for an artist or whatever, you know. So that's where I found solace in the expression, and then meeting halfway with the set design and the film was like nothing was edited. It's pure freedom of imagination.
And then that title Ebonics then was about like creating a language from your community, from your makeup, that like samples from here and there and is its own unique form of speaking and communicating.
Exactly. Like the title fell perfectly on it because, you know, there's a responsibility I have too, you know, just as much as the extenuating circumstances of there not being much diversity, you know, being a Black designer on the Parisian fashion schedule, I'm turning that into, this is the language that me and my community speak. It's one of many dialects. It's not singular. And so Ebonics is just a term that I grew up with like in the sort of 90s as like, describing Black linguistics and how it's used to signify within our community of emotions, of representation. So it's a conundrum in a carefully put place of like, that collection is a breakthrough in my understanding of having Black design exist in it's what Josh said about the title, you know, it's peculiar contrasts, you know, in the exact right light to sort of to pull that off.
And I'm a total fashion novice, but I do feel like I was struck, you know, by, you know, like the hats and the kilts and the armbands. And it's like anytime you tried to rest on one understanding of what you were seeing, it was disrupted by what you saw next. And so it was like this incredible practice of like collage and imagination as I was also looking at the clothes, you know, and appreciating them through the kind of makeup of the film. So it's like the nested brilliance is just so good again. So I want to ask about the set too, because we didn't really talk about the set. And you know, I mentioned the sort of snowy alpine landscape, and then you moved to what at first looked to me like a sort of like a corporate lobby, like a sort of marble lobby. There was like this white, like leather knoll chair. And then that starts to give away to these like cubes or pixels. Like, it's like, is this like a Minecraft set? You know, like it starts to sort of break apart, and there are like portals opened. And there's also this ice rink that, you know, people are moving on. So I just wonder, you know, how would you describe sort of the set and what, you know, how some of the ideas of the sort of built space in which much of the film and the performances and the community took place was sort of interested in conveying, or the ideas in it?
Josh can go, because I called him with like I was like, yo, cube, marble cube. And then he ran, you know, him and the team ran with it.
It was like, it was like this huge cube that breaks away, but then it was like, what people, I guess you get it, but you don't really, I don't know if you really see it. Like, there was one shot that's really supposed to, I don't know if it's in there, but it's like, one of the dancers like punches the wall from the inside and the block comes out of the wall on the outside. And it's like, the whole thing is just like, I don't know, like 1,700 blocks. So It's like, it really feels like fragile, you know, but it's like this strong, it's so massive. So it has this kind of power, but it's like this big fragile thing that can like easily crumble, you know?
Like the original intention was an 8-hour long piece where the bricks were hand moved, you know, like very long format, which still might happen. You never know, you know, like, but yeah, you know, the influences in my architecture background, Barcelona Pavilion as like a representation of the canon, you know, like that's where I learned, that's how I rationalize architecture. But then it being sort of invaded and, you know, and sort of crumbling over time. Like I've done films in the past in my career that I haven't released, investigating Black people in modernist architecture. So that tension like makes me, it's a metaphor for myself. It's like same metaphor as everything that I sort of represent. But the set design was critical. Like a team that I work with called Play Lab helps me like architecturally build and rationalize the details. But again, it was making space bringing the right people in and having everyone have their train run on time. That's more the interesting thing about creating art at this scale and for this purpose, is that like Josh was able to look at that and be like, all right, I got it. And I didn't have to intervene any further than that. You know, the Malik's the dancer who like falls against the wall and maneuvers their way around it. He's improvising based on, you know, a note that Josh had played. You know, all that sort of molded into what people visually saw on the screen.
Yeah, it's crazy that like the space, the architecture, the collection, and like the performance like lend each other transitional like impetus. It's like the transition from the snow to it snowing inside into the lobby, into the construction of the lobby, into like the lights turning off is like they kind of like flow in a way and like kept influencing each other that would also influence like the music, the like the timing of like the scenes itself, and like how many pieces are getting deconstructed. I don't know. It just all kind of fell into place.
Well, I wonder maybe I mean, maybe we'll just like sort of pull back a little bit. And I know I'm speaking to you. I think Josh, you're in Zurich, and Virgil, are you in Paris right now?
I'm in Chicago.
You're in Chicago right now. Okay. Yeah. So I know that you all are sort of always all over the world and seeing so much and part of kind of amazing creative communities. And I just wonder, like, you know, that question of what feels really like riveting right now to you and sort of culture writ large, or what are you seeing and doing that feels, you know, most urgent and life fulfilling?
There's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, like, there's a lot of like, I just watch kids dancing online all the time. I'm like, I don't know.
What's cool, you know, like I'm in America, so the vaccine is like rolled out, right? And I was just in Paris last week, and it's like I can now see the light at the end of the cultural tunnel, where it's like, okay, we outside again, you know, like they're like the music is, you know, and all the collaborators from Tosh to Wu Sang to Asma, Candace, you know, like Candace Williams is about to have like a Michael Jordan rookie season of art, you know, like she's got things at the Serpentine, she's got stuff happening X, Y. And so like, we're all, as you can tell by our excitement, we're a community first. And so me, it's like support. It's like, I'm excited about the explosion onto the scene of, you know, art curators, kids of color, you know, making work that now we have like hopefully some resources and space to do so, or fighting for more space for those to represent that. But it's like post-pandemic kinda, you know, so I'm excited at what Josh's like solo work is going to be. You know, I just know that there's like crazy ideas coming from inside his space or his community. And same for me, you know, like I'm inspired and energized.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you also like give us the rock that we can throw to make that ripple. You know, like that's what's like, it's like the community is really strong right now. I feel like I feel like it can go anywhere. I mean, Candace is crazy.
Yeah, like her work is insane. But I can't give hats off to ICA and you, Ruth. You know, like I've done these things before, and one of the most poignant like zooms about this type of work that we're doing is like it is the institution's job to sort of like follow the gut and see like the future is wherever you're sparked by something you see, you know, and quintessentially what we're talking about is expressions that weren't recognized. When you talk about the pain and the frustration, like that's the glimmer that wait, like, oh, in our lifetime, like the work will get recognized. So then it can sort of be a 2.0 of about being recognized, you know, and that's what excites me, you know, that's what I get high off of.
Yeah. I wonder, I'll just ask one last question. And I've been thinking, you know, one of the questions that I've been asking as we're opening this exhibition at the ICA is, it opened first in Chicago in 2019, and that feels both not that long ago and like a lifetime ago. And sort of what has changed, what has Virgil been up to? And my answer to this, what has been really striking to me in these last couple of years, is just the incredible platforms, Virgil, that you've really intentionally made to support Black artists, Black curators, young designers of color. And I'm thinking of like the scholarship fund, the figure skating award, where my friend Meg recently, received that. And, it's like, I feel like it's part mentorship, it's part philanthropy, and it's part just straight up recognizing talent and like, making platforms to sort of recognize the talent and, like you're saying, shining light. So I just wonder, like, I know that you've been doing this work beforehand, but I feel like in these last couple of years, it's really been like a very concerted, effort on your part. And I wonder sort of, was what led you to sort of be at the moment where you decided to sort of put what seems like, a good amount of your energy into creating these, what I would call like direct aid platforms?
To do this work that I was sort of mentored in a different way. I came up under a different method for community building, which is, I always wanted to build something opposite of that, just in sort of short speak. It's like often the world's like singular, like you sort of get what you can get and then you just kind of do a little bit. And so as soon as I was able to sort of understand the world and how it sort of shaped, I decided to put that direct aid. It's almost like in the DNA, it's synonymous with the timing of the idea, because I'm a workaholic. So that I don't worry about sort of forward trajectory. But what I worry about is what's created in my wake. Like there has to be people, there has to be community, there has to be more me, there has to be more Josh. If I'm doing it and there's nothing in the wake, that means that the work falls flat. It doesn't exist to me. I'm not judging work by the output or people's reaction. I'm judging it by like, oh, what young style, Ibrahim, the stylist, like, he's now the head of editor-in-chief of Days. Like that to me is the metric, because it's like, it's too vast. The spaces that the inequity basically is kind of what I mean. So the only way that I can do that is like, when we think of an idea, when I think of a film, when I think of a show, it's already like, who I can collaborate with that also needs a voice. So it doesn't become like a mark. It's not even like we have to paste it on at the end. It's the inception of the idea. And I'm doing that so that it creates like a methodology in my canon for how to exist as an artist or how to exist as a creator. So that's sort of how I can sleep at night, frankly.
I cannot wait to see the next thing you and your collaborators and your community make together. And we will all be so fortunate to learn from it and be inspired by it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Cool. Peace. See you, Josh. Bye, Ruth.